They were just a group of friends and they're like, oh yeah, we're slow traveling. So we've been here in Argentina for like 6 months already. I met them at the end of their stint. Oh, what do you mean by slow travel? And they're like, oh, it's just when you're not rushing through a city and you don't even have a time frame on it sometimes. And we rented this apartment for 6 months and we're slowing down. We don't have to be doing things every day. We don't have to be spending tons of money every day. But if you really want to get to know somewhere, you want to see like how slow the pace is, even if it's a tiny town. You got to spend time there. Yeah, it's basically focusing on fewer places in a shorter amount of time, realizing that you're still a tourist where you are, but being able to assimilate with the local culture and being able to do what you want when you want to and not rushing through things and not having to like have a checklist where you see every single thing in that city and then it's like on to the next notch in your belt.
Boom, what is up everyone? Tom Wedding back here again. And today I'm joined by Leah. We're going to talk about some interesting topics, including slowing down your travels and going with the flow a little bit more. So I'm super excited to dive in. Leah, thank you for jumping on. I'd love you to introduce yourself quickly before we get going.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. I'm Leah, everyone. I'm founder of LA in Flight and Ticket to Anywhere podcast. We talk about all the gears, tools, and tips for you to live a more travel-filled life. And by day, I'm an event manager. I'm also a travel content creator, and I host and manage and produce my own podcast as well. So that is what takes me around the world, actually.
I love it. I love it. When did you get started traveling?
Oh, man. I guess it depends on what kind of trip we're looking at. I would say I grew up traveling all over the US, road tripping with my family, not too many international trips growing up. I would say my university graduation trip, I went to Greece for 3 weeks. And I think that's what really started it. So that was like 2011. And it feels like decades and decades ago, but that was only 12 years ago. So.
Yeah, time flies when you're traveling, right? When you're on flights.
Mm-hmm.
But talk to me about your travel experience, because I was really interested reading your answers to the podcast questions. And you were saying that you really want to normalize like slow travel. And so can you talk a little bit about like what that actually means? Like what is slow travel?
Yep. 100%. I think as far as my experience, it's shifted over the past 12 years, right? Like as any good college grad or university grad did, I went out and found a corporate job that, I would try to climb the ladder. So vacation and time off and holiday time was very limited, right? And then as I realized what I wanted more so in my life, I tried to search for roles and opportunities that would allow me more freedom and flexibility. So one of my pillars of LA in Flight is slow travel. And I assumed everyone automatically knew what it was. And I actually wasn't introduced to the term until around 2016, I'd say, maybe halfway through my travels. And I actually learned it from a bunch of Americans while I was living in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I did a year of backpacking through South America. I feel like as many people do, they either do that or they backpack Southeast Asia, right? Lucky ones can backpack both continents, but I did my year around South America. And while I was there, I knew I wanted to spend a year around South America. I had a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires, and I was like, I'm just going to like go with the flow over there. I actually thought I was going to spend 12 months in Buenos Aires, and I didn't. So halfway through my 6-month stint in Argentina, I met this cool group of Americans who were working online, which I was already doing. It was an easy transition for me. I basically became a marketing consultant. The year before I left for Argentina, I got my teaching English as a foreign language certification, which lasts your entire life. It's a little bit of a different certification from TESOL, the other certifications that others have, but I was certified to teach English online. I did a little bit of that. The work was, I don't know, my marketing background was a lot stronger. So I think I leaned into that online. And, it was what I really wanted to do. Teaching English kind of became a backup. It's tough. You have to really love it, right? And so while I was down there, I met a group of Americans who owned they owned businesses where they could work from anywhere. It was essentially e-commerce. And then one of the girls also had she could work from anywhere, but she wasn't part of the business. They were just a group of friends. And they're like, oh yeah, we're slow traveling. So we're here in Argentina. We've been here in Argentina for like 6 months already. I met them at the end of their stint and I was like in the middle of mine. I was like, oh, what do you mean by slow travel? It just sounds so obvious from the words. And I'm like, well, explain, what do you think it is? And they're like, oh, it's just when you're not rushing through a city and you don't even have a time frame on it sometimes. And we rented this apartment for 6 months and we're slowing down. We don't have to be doing things every day. We don't have to be spending tons of money every day. It's not necessarily living on a broke backpacker style, but to me, I was like, oh, that's so interesting because that's exactly what I was doing that entire year. And I didn't realize it. So I was like, okay, this is really cool. But to me, it has today in 2023 is molded into something like realizing that you're still a tourist where you are, but being able to assimilate with the local culture and being able to do what you want when you want to and not rushing through things and not having to like have a checklist where you see every single thing in that city and then it's like on to the next notch in your belt.
Yeah. And there's so many people who do it like that, even myself, when I started traveling, I did the same thing. I was in a new city every single week, every single week. And so I never got the opportunity or the time to actually dive deep into the culture and the traditions and like what that place can offer you. And so I think that's such a thing to really slow things down. And so talk a little bit more about how people can do that. Like, what does that kind of look like in reality? Like, is it just as simple as booking a place for a longer time, like stay, or like, what does that kind of look like to you?
Right. So I'm in a bunch of forums, Slack groups, Facebook groups, right, on travel, different types of travel. And a lot of people ask for advice on like, oh, here's my itinerary, right? And to me, travel is very personal. I definitely try not to judge or discriminate. People can travel. It's such a privilege. And I understand the privilege that I have that I'm literally able to go off to the Philippines for a month or South Africa for 2 months at a time. Like it's a very small percent of the population that can do that, right? So I always recognize that when I'm trying to help people. But if people are asking for advice, someone said there's like, oh, here's my month itinerary in Europe. And it was probably like 11 cities. I'm not even kidding. And I told them, I was like, you know what? I'm a big proponent of slow travel. And I think you should cut out 4 of these countries, period. Because this person was trying to visit like Venice in Italy and then some city in Switzerland. And I'm like, why don't you just cut out those countries completely and focus on London, Paris, Amsterdam, since those are physically close together. You can discover more in each city. There's so much. London is one of my favorite cities on the planet, but I'm a big city fan. I love big cities. And like, there's so many day trips you can take from a big city, right? And you're so interconnected to other places. And I just think that, soaking in a place doesn't mean just soaking in like that square mileage of a place. It means like maybe the surrounding countryside, like the beach, the mountains, the, other parts of it that you can get to that are easily accessible. It's not necessarily like, okay, London, we're going to stay in the center of London. I'm just going to explore the center of London for 3 weeks. No, I did do that. I did stay in London for 3 weeks, which is also like another version of my slow traveling because I really want to get to know, the city. But yeah, it's basically focusing on fewer places in a shorter amount of time. So, Tom, you're Australian. I'm from the US. There's a lot of people who are working in the corporate world. Actually, not in Australia, but in the US, they still only get 2 weeks off a year, right?
Yeah, it's very
a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, they'll say like, okay, I'm going to do half of like Eastern Europe in the 2 weeks. I'm like, no, don't do that. Literally 2 weeks. I would pick 2 countries max to do. And 2 weeks, I'd probably pick maybe 4 cities max. But I'm a huge fan of like a minimum of like a minimum of 3-4 days in a place, even if that it's like a little countryside place in the country. And people are going to come on here and tell me they're like, that's so boring. I'm like, okay, that's great. Like, that's what you want to do. But if you really want to get to know somewhere, you want to see like how slow the pace is, even if it's a tiny town, you got to spend time there. So those are some examples of how I would slow travel. And like I said earlier, like, you don't have to check everything off the list. Like you could do what you're doing at home, whether that's partying or going to the gym or like relaxing at the park with a book in this place, because cultures can be different in so many ways. Like, for example, in Europe, maybe the drinking culture is different. Like you'll be, I don't know, in the US, like we don't really, it's not super, super common to like go out and drink at a park, right? Because a lot of places you can't drink in public like that. But maybe in Europe, it is common to bring a bottle of wine and go sit at the park. Or like I'm in Southern California where the weather's always nice. So we don't always have to be at a park drinking a bottle of wine. We can do that. We can do that anywhere, and we can do it any time of year. Whereas like maybe it's, a place in Spain, like on a hilltop, the sunset, like that's what people do, right? But you wouldn't really know that unless you were there during maybe a certain season, or it's there's a certain festival going on during that time that you're visiting. So it's just a lot of mixing up the schedule, trying new things, but also realizing that you don't need to do everything and that you can slow things down and pick and choose.
Absolutely. Do you think part of it is like, I think a big part of it is the fear of missing out, right? It's like
Yeah.
go see as much as possible and experience as many different countries and cities as possible. Yeah. And it's also probably a little bit of ego, like wanting to post on social media, like, hey, I'm in this country, in this country, in
100%.
that, and like looking like you have this busy lifestyle of traveling everywhere and like traveling to all these different places that are amazing. So I think it's like really interesting to hear you talk about slow travel, because I definitely realized the same, like now I stay in a place for at least 2 months, like to really experience.
Love it.
And in that place, like you said, there's so much to do. Like you can do little trips in so many different surrounding areas in that one place. And then you can kind of also be a bit more grounded as well in terms of like having a bit of a home base. And that's what I want to talk about next is like how you found it in terms of just grounding yourself in a place. Like how has that been for your mental health maybe, and like in terms of feeling more at home, like for those things, how's it been for you to be grounded in one place?
Ooh, it's so interesting. So I'm born, raised, and educated in LA, meaning I went to university here. Then I graduated, moved around a little bit, moved around within the States, and then I went traveling throughout South America. And then I actually lived in Melbourne, Australia for a year as well on the working holiday visa. And I would always come home to LA as like kind of my home base in between travels. After I came back from South America and Australia, I kind of actually decided that I actually don't want to move around every month and every 2 weeks. And a lot of my friends were having babies, and, I'm pretty close with my family. And I'm like, you know what? I think I like a home base. I like a home base, but I also love like having that home base and then taking off for 4 months and then coming back for 4 months and then maybe taking off for another 2 months and then coming back for a week and switching out my luggage or whatnot and then going somewhere different. So that's what the year of digital nomading in South America actually taught me, is that actually I don't want to be like a digital nomad that moves around every 2 weeks. That was like one of the biggest lessons I learned. And
like things from like traveling, like it's all such like a personal experience. Like some people like, I really enjoy being in a new place every week or every month, and that's really exciting. But then there's some people who are like, no, I like the stability. I like to be a bit more grounded and then have that as a place to travel from. So it's really interesting. People have these different experiences of travel.
100%. I did not expect that, actually. I thought like, oh my gosh, I'm going to nomad around South America for a year and I'm going to love it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I did not think that I was going to feel the opposite. And it was like I was at peace with it though. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I failed. I'm not like every other digital nomad out there, because I still consider myself a nomad. Like, I think a nomad is being able to have that complete like flexibility and freedom to do what you want. So the fact that I want to be in LA for 6 months of the year and be in Costa Rica for the other 6 months, that's massive to me. Like I wouldn't switch that for anything, or just be wherever I want, at any time. So I think having a home base in LA, especially like where I went to university, where my family is, where, I have a niece and a nephew now who I'm really close with. Like I love coming back from my trips and just knowing that like everyone's like, how, waiting for me, kind of like, how was your trip? We missed you. Like, come celebrate a couple milestones with us. And then, when it's quiet back at home, I'm like, all right, I'm going to take this month and go to Thailand really quick. And then I'll come back in a month, and we'll celebrate Christmas, something like that.
Yeah, and let's
So
remove the guilt around it too. Like, there's so much guilt and shit.
yeah,
Like, oh, I'm not traveling, so I'm not, living this digital nomad life, and it's like all this pressure to have to travel all the time. It's like, no, like that you're
100%.
absolutely right. Like being a digital nomad is about giving yourself freedom, like the freedom to choose to
Yes.
live your life. And so what that
Yes.
means is that if you want to be grounded in one place for a certain amount of time, you can do that. And that's a beautiful
Hmm.
thing to be able to do. And I think a lot of people misinterpret digital nomad as someone who like travels to new cities every day, every week, like
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
go, 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 just traveling the world all the time. Like, but it doesn't have to be like that. And there's so many different ways to do it. So yeah, it's a really
Yep.
interesting perspective to look at it like that.
I love having the flexibility. Like I see it as if my sister and brother-in-law need me to babysit their kids on a Wednesday, I can because I have that flexibility and I'm like I can literally still do work while they're napping. So and that, if they're in the next state or if they're down the street, it's still that location independence, right? Where I don't have to be in an office. Like I'm doing work and I have built a life that I could go babysit them on a random Wednesday if I want to. And I'm like, cool, not only do I get to spend quality time with them, I get to, still do my work, still do what, fuels everything that I'm doing. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love it.
Absolutely. So what's some of your favorite trips that you've been on? Favorite
Oh
places?
my gosh. Favorite place. Actually, it's so funny. I just came back from Podcast Movement. It's a huge podcasting conference that takes place in a different city in the US every year. This year it was in Denver. Just got back from it 2 weeks ago. And they usually have a couple booths set up for people to record. And I feel like I'm like, when I'm online dating or whatnot, that's the question I get the most. People are like, what are your favorite? And I think, sorry, y'all, I think it's sometimes I'm just like, that's the only question you can come up with. But I made a whole episode. I made a whole episode about it. It's not ready yet, obviously, but when it comes out, I'll slip you the file and then, I'll send it to everyone else who asks. In that episode, though, I named, let's see, in no particular order, Melbourne, Australia. I have an affinity to it. Yes, because I lived there and I absolutely love it, which is funny because I hate the rain and the cold, which it does get in the colder months. Thailand's on there for ease, for first time solo travelers, first time nomads, first time travelers, period. Thailand is excellent. Colombia is probably my favorite country in South America. What else was on there? I said London, of course, because I do love the big city. I said the whole country of the Philippines. I know these are so broad. Some of them are so broad, but I said the Philippines. I'm a little biased. My parents are from the Philippines, so I do love going back and visiting when I can. And then I think that was the five. I think those are my new top five right there.
Powerful, 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 powerful.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what's one place you'd really like to go to?
Portugal.
Portugal.
And what I'm doing with Portugal? It's kind of sad actually, because I always this is so morbid, but I live my life with like, what if you never come back here ever again? Which is also great. But like, what if you get hit by a bus tomorrow and you can't go back to where you're going? So like live your life, right? But I keep pushing Portugal back because I'm like, I want to go for a special occasion. I'm like, yo, life is a special occasion. Why am I pushing it back? I'm pushing it back. Like, I was like, oh, I'll go next year. I was like, no, wait, I'll wait till next winter. Or like, oh no, maybe I should go in 2025. I keep pushing it back. I'm like, why are you pushing back? You need to just go.
Just do it.
So
Just
I
do it.
know I really need to. Let's see, where else? Portugal. Oh my gosh, so many places. But I did go to South Africa this past January, which it takes forever for anyone to get to. So it's a little bit of a harder place to get to. It just takes it a long time. But I feel like South Africa is like not a lot of people travel to it just because it takes so long to get there. So I feel like that was really special because I spent a month there and I was working remotely and it was so cool to talk about that whole experience because it's just not something that's easy, easy to get to for people. So we have a whole episode on Ticket to Anywhere about, how it was working and living there. But it was very, very unique. And I was very surprised by some of the things that I learned while I was down there. So that was kind of like a, unknown bucket list item that I checked off recently.
That looks super beautiful down there. I really want to do that trip. I feel like that would be really
Yeah, it's
awesome.
awesome.
How do you find it like when you do these little trips and these travels, like how do you find it with your work? Like, is it easy for you to balance? Is it easy for you to find space to work at? Like, how have you
Right.
found it for you?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of, so I contract and freelance a lot as an event manager. Let's start with that because people are like, how do you do that? Because I physically have to be at the events a lot of times, but I plan my travels around the events. So I can do most of the work remotely up until the event. And then when I need to be at the event, I'll be at home in Los Angeles or wherever else they need me, right, in the world or wherever else in the US. So, as far as working while I'm in a place, I always try to make sure if it's like super important or I'm going to need good Wi-Fi, good lighting, good internet connection for a while, I'll cough up the money and like rent a co-working space. But other than that, I'll just head to a cafe, head to a library, head to somewhere I know that I could stay for a couple of hours and that the Wi-Fi is decent. I know I'll have access to like food and an ATM if I need it or drinks, things that'll like have me set for a few hours. But I do a lot of research. And then when I pick a place, I always have like backup B and backup C as well.
Definitely. What does that research look like for you?
Oh, let's see. A lot of Google Maps. Google Maps is probably like my favorite app on the planet. I'm not even kidding. And then bookmarking, reading reviews, cross-checking reviews with maybe like TripAdvisor, Yelp if it's in the United States. Maybe some booking.com, maybe some YouTube videos, maybe some just good old regular Google searching, just picking out certain blogs and like highlighting things. What I'll do if I'm researching something extensively, I'll start a Word, like a Google Doc, a plain Google Doc. And I'll be like, all right, coffee shops in Melbourne open past 5 p.m. And then I'll compile like all the literature because, that's not common in Australia. That's not common at all. I'll compile all the literature I've read online and be like, okay, this one in St. Kilda's open until 7, but like they only take cards or something like that. This one is open until 9 p.m., but then they don't allow laptops after 5 p.m., those types of things. So extensive research.
Wow, I'm like the complete opposite. I'm like so
Oh,
with it. Like I'll rock up to a cafe and they'll be like, "Oh no laptops allowed here." I'm like, "Okay, I'll go to the next one." Just like do it that way.
oh my God. But then I've done that before, like just wing it. And like sometimes I'll have to be on a call though. I'm like, I don't have time to mess around. And then there are times where I've done that and I'll search for like an hour. But
Uh,
also one of like the pillars of LA and flight, besides slow travel, I love coffee. I'm obsessed with coffee. So like going to coffee shops is actually like an event, an activity. It's a big deal to me because, I love to also inform others like, oh, okay, this cafe has the best matcha. This cafe has like iced coffee, which also wasn't common in Australia when I was there. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So, it's more than just a workspace for me. It is a place of like gathering, place of community, but it's also a place I love to tell others about and be like, look at all the things you can do here. Look how this coffee shop is a pillar of this neighborhood in Melbourne, that type of thing. So it's part of what I like to talk about, online, social media, etc.
yeah, and it really embodies that whole message of like work from anywhere, right? It's like you can
Yeah,
literally pick up your laptop, go to any cafe in any area, any city, and be able to do your work. And so like that's a
yeah.
beautiful thing too. Like, yeah, like everyone's like posting all these photos of like working on the beach and stuff, but like how realistic really is that, Like out in the
It's
sun,
not.
it's hot, like your laptop overheats, like
I hate it. People like posting in hammocks. I'm like, you are not. I know you did that for the photo because who works in a hammock with the sun shining directly on them? Like you can't see your laptop. It's gonna overheat. You're gonna fall out.
yeah, it's just like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, exactly.
All good, all good. Well, that's a pretty good place to wrap this podcast up. But I would love to hear any last
Okay.
thoughts you want to add, any last bits of value or insights or anything from your experience being a digital nomad and anything you want to share.
Ooh, I would say, well, I guess two big things. If you really want to nomad and start, you're starting out, diversify your skill set. Absolutely. You could be a project manager and there's thousands of jobs for project managers around the world. But at the same time, like I said, when I first started off going to South America, I knew I could find a job in marketing online. easy, but you never know like when your contract will be cut, when the company's doing cuts. You know, you don't know how long the contract's going to be for. You're just kind of like taking whatever work you can if you're freelancing like I was. So before I even left, I got certified to teach English online. I'm like, this is a good backup. And then while I was in South America, actually, when I got to Peru, I started bartending my way through party hostels. So not only did I have my, certificate to teach English online, and was I doing marketing consulting on the side, but I wasn't getting paid it was like work for accommodation. I wasn't getting paid to bartend in these hostels, but I was slowing the spending down by being part of like their staff. And I met like literally some of my best friends who I still talk to this day. And I learned so much. I've never been part of the hospitality industry anywhere in the world until I started bartending in Peru. And it was like, and we were all like not in the books. So it was such a different experience. And it was like the craziest 3 months of my life. Like every country I went to in South America, like life just got crazier and crazier, and I would never change that experience for everything. But as you can see through that whole year, I kept doing different things to kind of like keep me afloat, keep the travels going, etc. And then in 2016, I wasn't an event manager yet. It wasn't until I moved to Australia that I pivoted my career. I was always event managing on the side, but I was like, you know what? I need to start getting paid for it because I'm good at it and I love it. So that's what I went to Australia to do. And that has set up the basis for me to be able to travel and do all kinds of different jobs while I'm traveling the world, today in 2023 when I'm going different places. So it's like one of my biggest pieces of advice, like diversify your skill set. And then we've talked about it throughout the episode, but digital nomad is about freedom, flexibility to like choose your life, go where you want to go. You don't have to fall into the pressure of like being in a new city every week. That's exhausting. You'll literally physically get sick if you don't do it correctly. So, it's okay to slow down. Slow travel's the way to go.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on. Really appreciate your time and your shares. It's been very insightful and a great conversation. So where can people find you online?
Thanks, Tom. You can find me LA in Flight anywhere, like literally any social media platform, or Ticket Number 2 Anywhere podcast. We're on YouTube, but you can also listen to us on your favorite listening platform as well. And it's Ticket to Anywhere podcast on also any social media platform.
Amazing. Thank you so much for jumping on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.